Urgent shock in the Kremlin. Step by step, Ukraine is reclaiming Crimea. Strike after strike turns the peninsula into a blazing inferno. Panic grips Russians as the Crimean Bridge shakes. 2 unique aircraft are destroyed for the first time in history, and fuel lines stretched endlessly. Ukrainian intelligence gains full access to Crimea's occupation data, while Putin rages in despair. Let's talk about it. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Maria Farafonova, and here are the latest news. The Kremlin's military machine taking heavy hits. Ukrainian drones are repeatedly unleashing brutal strikes on the occupiers. Recently, several airfields came under attack at once, with Kacha and Belbek at the center of attention. Locals are far from thrilled by all this chaos, and no wonder. There's no fuel, cars can't be filled, and there's no way to escape the peninsula.
I don't know, am I supposed to listen to all this tonight or what? I'm just shocked.
The work of Ukraine's defense intelligence impresses not only with precise strikes on strategic targets. Recently, as media report, HUR cyber specialists carried out a stunning operation that shocked the occupiers. They once again gained full access to all computers and servers on the self-proclaimed authorities of temporarily occupied Crimea, over 100 terabytes of intelligence materials. Among them are the official correspondence of the so-called head of Crimea, Sergei Aksyonov, as well as working documentation and communication between ministries and agencies of the occupation government. In addition, cyber specialists uncovered a large cache of documents on the illegal transfer of Ukrainian children from the temporarily occupied territories of Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia regions.
We managed to obtain the lists of minors who were taken by the occupation authorities to the temporarily occupied Autonomous Republic of Crimea and to Russia, including the children's personal data, information on their guardians, and details of their places of residence and schooling.
Meanwhile, panic as occupied Crimea is spreading throughout Putin's entire army. And no wonder Ukraine's armed forces are delivering devastating blows to Russia's air defense, navy and aviation. Almost every day, the peninsula is engulfed in flames, and it seems the moment of cutting Crimea off from Russia is closer than ever. All the details in the video ahead.
The Russians are clearly having problems in Crimea, and the further it goes, the more surprises await the enemy.
Crimea is gradually, if we draw an analogy, thanks to the Ukrainian defense forces turning into, well, something like Krimobaivka, by analogy with Chornobaivka, yes, where the Russian army, Russian occupiers, and accordingly their weapons and equipment are constantly being destroyed.
Ukrainian defenders have a clear understanding of where the Russian occupiers are located in occupied Crimea and are doing everything possible to drive them out.
There is active work being done in Crimea. The process of demilitarizing Crimea is ongoing. This is an integral part of the deoccupation process.
In temporarily occupied Crimea, there are increasing problems with fuel, water, and military equipment. Ukrainian strikes are destroying enemy bases, while the Russians are trying to conceal the scale of their losses. We are talking about ground, air, and naval operations that our defenders are successfully carrying out.
Today, the Russian military facilities in Crimea that came under attack, let me emphasize, military facilities, are those that pose a threat not only to the peninsula itself, because they are located there, but also directly threaten other regions of our country. This critical equipment is currently being actively used to launch devastating missile strikes on our sovereign territory, and accordingly, it is precisely what enables the Russians to conduct extensive and thorough reconnaissance of our precious airspace.
Enemy air defense facilities are being regularly eliminated, naval targets are being destroyed, and ground targets are being struck, including railway infrastructure.
The air defense systems in Crimea, which are currently operating very actively and trying to repel strikes by Ukrainian defense forces, are not succeeding at all. They are also being used as instruments of killing.
Problems with supplies are growing on the peninsula, and the Russians' defensive positions are collapsing.
Work is also underway on those key points that will open the door to Crimea for us, in particular the Kinburn Spit, the Jarilhak Spit, and of course the territory of Crimea itself.
Almost every week, the destruction of Russian helicopters or air defense elements is recorded. This creates an atmosphere of fear among the occupiers and forces them to conserve resources. Ukrainian drones have even reached the government dachas. On the night of September 22nd, explosions were heard in the Foros area. Russian collaborators reported that drones struck the territory of the Foros sanatorium. It was reported that 3 people were killed and 16 were injured.
It is quite likely that this very guest house was the meeting place for, well, high-ranking officials, possibly from the FSB or quite possibly the armed forces of the Russian Federation. But we still haven't seen any objective monitoring, so-called, from the Russian side regarding the dead and wounded civilians. And that's the first thing the Russian Federation would have done if that were really the case.
The Russians kept silent about the fact that there were very important guests at the sanatorium at the time of the attack. Exactly who they were is not specified. A notice was posted on the sanatorium's social media page stating that on September 21st, the Foros Hall restaurant would be closed for special service. All the news is showing the school, which is located nearby.
The assembly hall of the school suffered the most damage. Here, part of the ceiling has collapsed. Just look at what's left of one of the walls. From the damage, it's clear that the drone flew in through this window. Now there are fragments scattered everywhere here.
The Russians tried to use this school for propaganda, which was closed on the weekend, no students, nothing, to cover up their latest terrorist attacks on our country. This is what the Russians always do. But again, it's not really about hitting the school itself, it's about the boarding house, also named Terletsky, which is located across from the school.
Nearby is also government dacha number 11, the Zarya facility. There's a helicopter pad here, so the FSO is always present and can be called in to secure meetings.
We are demonstrating that today our defense forces, with various means of firepower, can reach the occupiers anywhere in our Crimea, anywhere in the north, in the south, in the west, in the east. And today there is not a single facility in Crimea that cannot be struck by our defense forces. Russian air defense has once again proven its ineffectiveness. They are incapable of protecting either Russia or the temporarily occupied territories. In other words, Crimea's air defense system is being destroyed, and this is the path to the demilitarization of Crimea, and most importantly, its deoccupation. We are on the right track.
The Russian aircraft fleet on the occupied peninsula has been reduced as a result of the successful combat operations of the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence Special Unit, GHOSTs. 3 enemy Mi-8 multi-purpose helicopters were hit, as well as the expensive Russian radar station Nebo-U.
4 helicopters were destroyed in just a few days, along with 2 unique amphibious B-12 Chaika aircraft. There are actually very few of them in the Black Sea Fleet, if I'm not mistaken, only 6. And now 2 of them have already been destroyed.
Reconnaissance units showed compelling footage of the entire operation and detailed video of the extensive wreckage of one of the completely destroyed helicopters. Occupied Crimea has become a symbol of the fuel collapse. A large amount of fuel was brought here to refuel Russian military equipment. As a result, there is now a shortage and record-high fuel prices on the peninsula. The rise in gasoline prices is linked to Ukraine's strikes on Russian oil refineries. The video shows Sevastopol. In Yalta, gasoline was delivered to one of the gas stations. The line of people wanting to refuel is simply enormous. Neither the Russian authorities nor the occupation authorities in Crimea admit there is a problem. They insist that it's just a matter of logistics. Instances of human rights violations in Crimea are regularly documented and submitted to the UN Human Rights Council and the OSCE. The Russian occupation administration is forcibly conscripting Crimeans into the ranks of the Russian armed forces. Refusal to serve is punishable by criminal prosecution. In addition, there is ongoing militarization of children. The Crimean Peninsula eagerly awaits its rightful return, and the nation of Ukraine is steadfastly not allowing the Russian Federation to normalize its illegal occupation of the territory.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Meanwhile, fuel prices in occupied Crimea are skyrocketing. Gas stations are either empty or drowning in kilometer-long lines. Locals say finding gasoline is becoming nearly impossible. Remarkably, the occupation authorities came up with an excuse. According to the so-called head of the government, the fuel lines were caused by the weather. The fake Prime Minister of Crimea, Yuri Gotsenyuk, claimed that regular supplies of gasoline, diesel and gas will be restored on the peninsula in the coming days.
The situation with fuel supplies to Crimea will stabilize in the coming days. Due to unfavorable weather conditions, the Kerch ferry crossing operated with disruptions, which led to delays and reduced deliveries of fuel and lubricants to the peninsula. In the coming days, regular supplies of AI-95 gasoline, diesel fuel, and gas are expected to resume. Additionally, the issue of increasing deliveries of AI-92 gasoline is being worked out. The government of Crimea keeps the situation under constant control and is taking all necessary measures to provide the region with fuel.
And of course, deception from the Russians couldn't be left out. While people in Crimea struggle to find fuel, profiteers are cashing in on their own. On the occupied peninsula, resellers are offering gasoline and diesel at inflated prices up to 180 rubles per liter. Sales take place outside official gas stations through trucks and warehouses. This was reported by the Yellow Ribbon Resistance movement.
In occupied Crimea, resellers are selling a litre of AI-92 and AI-95 gasoline for 150 and 180 rubles respectively. The price of diesel reaches 80 rubles. Activists of the Yellow Ribbon movement report that sales take place outside official gas stations, from trucks and large warehouses. The resellers find customers in local Telegram chats. At the same time, in the chat of the so-called Governor Razvozhayev, resellers offering such services have not been banned for more than a day, and their messages are not being deleted. This raises suspicions that the resellers are connected with representatives of the occupation administration.
Fuel problems are hitting not only Crimea but all of Russia. Some Russians are running around in panic searching for gasoline, while others are reselling it at sky-high prices. What is the real situation in Russia with oil and fuel? Watch now.
In Primorsky Krai, there are kilometer-long lines at gas stations due to a fuel shortage.
Here's what the line looks like at Melnikhny. Basically, this is the situation at Alliance. Well, it's probably several kilometers long by now. All of this is just for some gasoline.
Right now, there are gasoline problems in many regions of Russia. Earlier, in annexed Crimea, there were disruptions in gasoline supply at gas stations due to the special military operation. And in Zabaikalsky Krai, they started selling gasoline with ration cards. The main reasons are inflation, high demand, and constant strikes on oil refineries. The last factor is becoming very significant. Ukrainian drones attack Russian oil refineries almost every night. This is a strike on the Lukoil oil refinery in the Volgograd region, which is among the top 10 in Russia and is one of the largest producers of petroleum products in the southern federal district. Over the past week, Ukrainian UAVs have struck oil refineries 3 times already. The plant has ceased operations approximately until mid-September.
We are now seeing reports almost every day that major significant oil refineries in the European part are being hit. The most recent one is the Lukoil plant in Volgograd. And drones are even reaching as far as the Ukhta plant in Komi, another Lukoil facility. And some plants have simply shut down.
On August 2nd, after a UAV strike, the Novokuybishevsk refinery stopped its operations. On August 11th, the Samara refinery stopped accepting raw materials. On August 15th, it became known that the Volgograd refinery had shut down. And on the same day, after a drone attack, the Samara refinery also stopped accepting oil for processing.
Drone attacks on Russian oil refineries, which intensified in August and led to the shutdown of at least 4 major refineries, have deprived the economy of 1/7 of its most powerful oil processing capacity. Thus, in just under 3 weeks, oil producers lost 44.3 million tons of annual refinery capacity, which is minus 13.5% of the country's total, amounting to 328 million tons per year.
According to Reuters, repairs at some plants will last at least a month, and the Samara refinery will remain idle until the end of August. Difficulties with repairs are related to sanctions.
Western equipment for oil refineries fell under European restrictive measures as part of the very first sanctions package following the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. And this is causing disruptions. As a result, in 2025, Russia once again faced a gasoline shortage. Exchange prices for AI-92 and AI-95 have soared since the beginning of the year by 40% and 50% respectively, setting new historical records of 71,970 rubles per ton and 81,337 rubles per ton.
If Ukraine continues to strike Russian oil refineries, the problems with prices and the availability of gasoline itself in Russia will only get worse. And the current lines for fuel in some regions of Russia will seem like a minor inconvenience compared to the real problems that could arise, for example, as soon as a month from now.
If the Ukrainians were to forget Biden's explicit request not to strike vital oil terminals on the Black Sea, such as those strategically located in Novorossiysk and Tuapse, or indeed on the Baltic Sea, where Ust-Luga and Primorsk are the two main crucial terminals, and subsequently start attacking them, this action would very seriously and significantly affect Russia's overall ability to effectively export its oil supplies.
Strikes on Russian oil refineries and the resulting loss of capacity, as well as the potential increase in attacks, are a serious trump card for Zelensky in possible negotiations with Putin. The war is costing the Kremlin a great deal. Russia's budget deficit for the first 7 months of 2025 amounted to $54 billion. This was written on his page by the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Andriy Yermak.
Russia's budget today is a bubble. In July alone, the deficit amounted to a colossal $13 billion. From January to July, it reached $54 billion. This is more than the annual expectations. Expenditures have increased by 28% year-on-year. Revenues by only 2.8%. You can pretend to be sour on all you want, but when your economy is collapsing because of war, you're just a sinful golem, hiding your tattered pocket from the eyes of the whole world.
13 billion rubles is more than the annual expectations. The gap between revenues and expenditures is simply catastrophic. And the holes in the budget are big, but not that big, say even Russian economists.
The situation is becoming much worse than it was in 2023 to 2024. If in previous years the authorities at least didn't constantly miss their budget deficit targets, they promised $1.5 trillion rubles, but ended up with a budget hole of 3.5 trillion rubles. This year, though, the situation has become truly grim. The war has been going on for 3.5 years now. There is a systematic destruction of the civilian sectors of the economy. Dozens of industries have become consistently unprofitable, and there has been a sharp decline in oil and gas revenues. And now we see that just in January to July, in the first 7 months of this year, the budget deficit has already exceeded the entire revised plan for the current year. 4.9 trillion rubles. And just to put that in perspective, that's 4 times more than what the Ministry of Finance originally planned at the end of last year when they approved the budget for the current year.
Back in the spring, The Economist reported that since the end of 2024, there has been a sharp downturn in the Russian economy. The downturn came after a period when the Russian economy was showing growth despite sanctions and the war. This was made possible by generous budget injections, high commodity prices, and the militarization of the economy.
A high-frequency index calculated by Goldman Sachs Bank shows that since the end of last year, Russia's annual GDP growth has dropped from about 5% to roughly zero. VEB, the Russian Development Bank, finds similar trends in its assessment of monthly growth. The business turnover indicator calculated by Sberbank, Russia's largest lender, has declined. The government, though more cautious, acknowledges that something is happening. At the beginning of April, the central bank noted that recently a number of sectors have seen a decline in production due to a sharp drop in demand.
Despite the figures and expert opinions, Putin has his own view of the budget situation.
As for the federal budget, the situation here is
stable. A couple of weeks ago, he said that all Russians had paid for the war with a surge in prices and a budget deficit. And now he says, we're going to cut military spending. But in reality, we see that military expenditures are actually growing by 25 to 30% year over year. And next year, they will continue to rise. Accordingly, this means that there will be money printing for a 6th year, there will be a year of severe austerity, and that Russians should prepare to tighten their belts, face unpopular decisions, and endure even more drastic increases. All kinds of levies, monopoly tariffs, utilities, recycling fees, excises, duties, the failure of national projects, cuts in secret spending on the population, the social sphere, healthcare, and education.
The situation is so stable that in many regions of the Russian Federation, according to the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine, one-time payments to those who sign a contract with the Russian army have been almost halved.
Against the backdrop of a federal budget deficit and deepening financial problems, one-time payments for those signing a contract with the army have been reduced in these regions. In Bashkortostan, from 1.6 million rubles down to 1 million. In the Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous Okrug, from 3.1 million down to 1.9 million. In the Belgorod region, payments have dropped from 3 million to just 800,000. in the Nizhny Novgorod region from 3 million to 1.5 million rubles.
In July, the EU introduced its 18th package of sanctions and lowered the price cap on Russian oil from $60 to about $47.6 per barrel. Because of this, according to Bloomberg, Russia's oil revenues fell by a third in the second summer month. And although only the Kremlin knows the real state and deficit of the budget, it seems that a default of the Russian economy is not far off.
What do you think about the latest events? Share your opinion in the comments, like the video, and stay informed about the main headlines. More to come?